Kia ora koutou, Markie here. So as you can tell, I'm in the mobile studio, and normally I like to give you a nice view of sea or forest or bush or something like that, but today I'm in a very unsalubrious location because I'm just waiting for someone to come out of an appointment, and so I don't normally show my ugly mug on these videos these days. I'm going to actually setting up a home studio, so I probably will be doing that more, but I'll try and spare you that sight if I can best avoid it. I look a bit weird because I've got marks here and here, because some of you will know I'm a masker, and I wear a flow mask, which is a really good one, and the reason I mask is there's plenty of research that says that the long-term effects of COVID are, really not good. So I attempt to avoid getting COVID by wearing a mask and other mitigations. If you want me to talk more about that, I can in another video if you're interested. But today I'm chomping at the bit to make this video. I wanted to make it yesterday actually, but I didn't get a chance or the opportunity. I was on the beach, and I wanted to shoot one from the beach, but it was so windy. Sometimes I can raise my voice so it carries over the wind, but on this occasion it was too strong. So yes, I want to talk about some of the theories of Carl Gustav Jung, and particularly or specifically I want to talk about his theory of the collective unconscious. And the reason I want to talk about that is everybody gets it wrong. Okay. Now the other thing I just want to point out is I have a sore tongue. I'm not putting that out for sympathy, but it is actually affecting how I speak. So if I sound a bit slurry, a bit raw, I think my tongue's just kind of slightly swollen as well. It's not bad. It's kind of nothing I really grumble about, but it is going to affect how I speak. So I will try and enunciate clearly, but I might sound a bit weird, or a bit weirder than normal. So I look a bit weirder and I sound a bit weirder, but then, what's new, Markie, you would say. So the collective unconscious. So first of all, I'll talk about what it isn't, and then we'll talk about what it is. So maybe talk a little bit about Jung as well, just to give it a context. So Jung is often mentioned in the same sentence as Sigmund Freud. Notice I say Sigmund, not Sigmund, because that's how you would pronounce it. People say that Jung was a student of Freud's, but he wasn't actually. He was a collaborator. They both had very similar ideas, and they came together and worked together. And then they spectacularly fell out. And it's kind of interesting that Freud mainly worked with neurosis in the early days, and Jung mainly worked with psychosis. So their theory before they met, their work was kind of running on parallel lines, but it was already slightly different. And one of the things that started Jung on the path that he followed. So Jung was actually a psychiatrist. Freud wasn't. People think that Freud was a psychiatrist. He was actually a neurologist. But Jung worked with people with psychosis. So the difference between psychosis and neurosis, very simply, is psychosis is where somebody will seriously lose touch with reality. Now, what is reality? I've got some very open mind about what reality is and also what psychosis might be, but without getting into that, which would be a whole video series in itself. So psychosis is characterized by hallucinations and or delusions. Okay. So when people talk about, people use words like crazy and mad and insane and stuff like that, generally they're referring to psychosis. So people who are psychotic will often have quite extreme ideas that they think are real. So often, sometimes not always of paranoid nature. That people are trying to listening to the thoughts in their head or putting thoughts in their head or things like that. That's quite a common one, and that's what a neurosis is basically like everything else, really. So now there are things. I work a lot with OCD. and with OCD, people can be kind of quite delusional, but it's delusional with a small d rather than a capital D. It's a different kind of delusion. So neurosis is everything else. Neurosis is depression, anxiety, OCD, phobias, and most things. There's probably more neurotic presentations and disorders than there are psychotic ones. So psychosis, people think it's the same as schizophrenia, but it's not. Schizophrenia is an illness which has psychotic symptoms, but it's not. It's more than that, and there are more things that characterize it. So Jung was working with psychosis. So working with people who were experiencing delusions, and what he found was that some of the delusions that people were reporting were very similar to things that could be found in ancient myths like the Greek mythology. But these were uneducated people who never, wouldn't know Greek mythology if it smacked them in the face. So it's not something that they'd read or come across. But there was a massive parallel between the nature of their delusion and some of the myths and stuff. So Jung started to look into that and form his ideas, which are very complex. I don't think even Jung understood Jung, because he was kind of always developing his ideas and stuff. So Jungian ideas have crept into lots and lots of things that are in the language and stuff like that. So Jung also came up with the differences between introverts and extroverts. If you've ever done the Myers-Briggs personality test, that's based on Jungian theory. So he's had a massive influence, probably not as big an influence as Freud. Because Jung is a bit more mystical. Jung was he went to some wackier places, if you like, some more mystical places, and that's where they one of the areas in which they went their separate ways. One of the areas where they disagreed. So Jung talks about the collective unconscious. Now, what people usually, when they talk about the collective unconscious, what I find is what people are normally talking about is some kind of hive mind, okay, that we can all tap into. A bit like that bit in the original Star Wars film where, who is it, Obi-Wan, when that planet's destroyed, Obi-Wan says, "Oh, I felt a great disturbance in the Force." It's almost like that. That's what people think it is, but that's not what it is, okay? So bear in mind, I'm talking about what it isn't first, right? It's not that at all, okay? Now, that's not to say that doesn't exist. I think it does, and I'm going to talk a bit about where I think it does exist and give some examples of that. But that's not what Jung meant by the collective unconscious. So when you're talking about kind of a hive mind, if that's a theory that you believe in, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're right, because nobody knows for sure, really. How do you prove something like this? But there's lots of evidence that would support having that kind of view, really. So I think consciousness is is an interesting thing. I think consciousness, I think it's Neil Donald Walsh that talks about consciousness as being a bit like blobs in a lava lamp. If anyone remembers lava lamps from the kind of hippie trippy kind of era, where you get blobs of kind of, I don't know what it is, in a glass tube that kind of that separate and also come together. Google lava lamp. You'll probably get a nice YouTube video of a lava lamp. You can probably get a virtual lamp. They're very relaxing to watch. You have them in a room. There's coloured light, and you can just sit there and listen to some nice music and imbibe the substance of your choice, whether it's tea or whatever it might be, and you watch these blobs moving around and morphing and separating, and very slowly. It's all quite hypnotic. So that consciousness can split and consciousness can meld. And I think consciousness does meld. And I think good examples of that are, well, things like ants and bees. These phenomenal creatures. People say, I wonder if there's any intelligent life, beyond the planet Earth, and we haven't really fully understood the intelligent life that's on the planet Earth, because you think about ants and bees that build these massive complex structures, and you get ants that actually farm, they do agriculture. I think and that's what probably where the term hive mind, well, it is where the term hive mind comes from, is that they've all got tiny brains, but they work together, they coordinate on such a phenomenal scale, to build on termites as well, and I suppose wasps, all these they're all related. Well, I'm not sure termites are. I know ants, wasps, and bees are related. If you think about it, it's amazing. And human beings, we couldn't do that so easily. We have to send each other emails and draw diagrams and things like that to make that. I'm gonna have to move this camera because my arm's getting tired. So I think a hive mind literally exists in a hive, and I think it exists in other ways as well. And I think a good example for me, the best example of where a hive mind can be observed is often in military units. And military units, particularly through the use of drill, where you're moving in a coordinated way as a group, as a body. And you hear the term esprit de corps, which is interesting. So esprit means spirit, and esprit de corps is often applied to military units. So esprit means spirit and corps means body. Although it's used to mean group, the spirit of a group. So if a group is very bonded and has got a sense of identity, we call that esprit de corps, but spirit of the body. But it's not talking about a single body, it's talking about a group. So that word says it all, really. And I think that's one of the reasons why marching and drill is so important to military units, even today in the age of, so somebody joins the military, they might end up as a drone pilot or something. So why do they need to learn to march? Well, learn to march kind of creates that sense of communion. And communion means coming together, a union, bonding, melding, and it's really important in a military unit. You need that, and research has shown that only in battles, there are only two types of people that actually shoot to kill the enemy or shoot to hit the enemy. And it's known that in lots of battles, a lot of soldiers will actually aim to miss, because nobody actually likes, or not nobody, but most people don't actually like killing people, which is kind of nice, just kind of reassuring. And there are two people that do aim to kill, or shoot to kill, or aim directly to hit the enemy, and they are the psychopaths. And the ones that really feel bonded and have a love. Love is probably the best word for their comrades, and they shoot the enemy because they want to protect their comrades, or want to protect their team, or to protect their body, the core. Core as a CORPS is a word that's used a lot in the military. So you have it's another word for regiment. So you'll have a parachute corps or Africa corps or whatever it might be. So I think they're examples of where you do have this kind of hive mind. It's all very theoretical, and I think the process of falling in love as well is like a melding of minds, and that's why it's so intoxicating when people fall in love, because you are kind of you're bonding and melding and joining. And there's lots of ways you can look at that. I've got videos where I talk about energy, as in the aura and meridians and that kind of thing, and I think it happens on that level as well. So I think again, just theories. If I hear a better argument, I'll change my view. So that is so we're up to 14 minutes odd, and we've still not talked about what the collective unconscious is. But it's more important to talk about what it isn't, in a way, because everybody thinks that's what it means. So if you want to talk about that process, then better to use terms like group consciousness, or higher mind, or hive mind, or something like that. Sometimes people use terms like world soul or things like that. So what Jung was talking about, and I think that one of the things with Jung is actually the language often is a bit unhelpful. Bear in mind it's kind of translated as well. So the collective unconscious. So what Jung believed was that we have a personal unconscious. So the unconscious is, we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. Sometimes it's represented as an iceberg. And with an iceberg, only a fraction of what you see of an iceberg above the surface. Most of the iceberg is under the surface. It's always bigger and underneath the surface, and where you can't see. And that's what the unconscious is, the part of ourselves that we can't see directly. And it's the bigger part, again, because it's what drives us. We're probably more driven by the unconscious than the conscious, which is why sometimes, generally speaking, we want good things. We want to be happy. We want a nice life. We want, if we're going to engage in romance, we want a nice partner. Not many people go around saying, I want to have a miserable life and I want to have an abusive partner. But the unconscious can actually desire some of those things for complex reasons, usually because it's kind of misunderstood something, or it's become familiar with things, or something's kind of gone wrong in there, which is why, so I talked about psychotherapy, because I'm a psychotherapist myself. We talked about psychotherapy in other videos, and I also did a written blog about what psychotherapy is. So one definition of psychotherapy is it's a therapy that actually works with the unconscious. But that's only one definition, and lots of people would disagree with that. And one of the things in the blog that I talked about was how there is no set agreed upon definition, and if you talk to 10 psychotherapists, you'll get 10 different answers. So that's the unconscious. The unconscious has bits that are kind of very deeply buried, and bits that are on the surface, and bits that kind of are more easy to access, and you can look at it in lots of different ways. So it's a little bit like if I ask you what the capital of Iceland is, and you know the answer, it will come to your mind. That will be conscious. But where does Reykjavik go when you're not thinking about Reykjavik? You could argue that's part of the unconscious. But the unconscious is famous for having kind of drives and desires and a kind of a will of its own, which might be different to the will of your conscious mind. And that's where we get problems, because the wash says hot, but the label says not, and the conscious and unconscious disagree. So Jung said we have this personal unconscious, and then we have a collective unconscious. Now I think a better word would have been inherited unconscious, because that's really what he was talking about. What we meant by collective is that we can all access, we all have it. It belongs to everyone because it's evolutionary. So the collective unconscious is based on all the thousands, or is it millions of years? How long have the humans been around? I don't even know. All the years that humanity's been around, and I guess presumably pre-humanity, if you believe in evolution, the influences that come from whatever creature we were before we evolved into human beings. So it's an evolutionary or an inherited unconscious. So it's based on a whole bunch of stuff. So what it means is that basically we will all respond to a greater or lesser degree to some of the same ideas because they are hardwired into us. Okay, so that's what he meant by the collective unconscious. So, and the arguments that he used for that theory were based on the fact that if you study fairy tales and myths and legends from modern cultures and compare, well, probably more, these things are older anyway, aren't they? But if you from different parts of the world, different cultures, you will get some of the same themes and motifs. So including cultures that would not have had contact with one another for or if they indirectly, if they did, even from an evolutionary perspective, it would have been thousands and thousands of years before, in between, if that makes sense. Didn't explain that bit very well. And these myths so these myths and these ideas and these stories, they're very similar, and they reoccur. And also, if you look at indigenous cultures throughout the world, they often have the same spiritual beliefs, or very similar ones. So they have gods. They have kind of demons. They sometimes they have some kind of creation myth about some how the world was created, and often these things are very, very similar and have the same parallels. And according to Jung's clinical experience, these mythological ideas, also come up in psychosis when people get deluded. So he called these things archetypes. And it gets kind of quite confusing because, especially as it gets mixed up with stereotypes as well. People use the term stereotype and archetype, and people generally misuse the term archetype as well. So an archetype can be something quite straightforward, like a father archetype. It's like we will all identify with a father archetype, and arguably, even somebody, if you had a child that was born and created in Brave New World. I did a video on that, by the way. You create children in a test tube, and they've got biological material from a man and a woman to make them, but they haven't actually got a mother and a father. They never know their mother and father. Nobody knows who the mother and father is, if they arguably do have a mother and father. The theory would be that they would still inherently identify with the idea of a father. That would kind of be like hardwired into them. You wouldn't have to explain to them what a mother and a father would be. They'd kind of know, because it's inside us. So it's instinctual things, but often they're things that very much they're very symbolic, or they're things that are often represented by symbols. So he would say that, so for example, like the trickster is an archetype, but actually the trickster is a symbol for an archetype, or lots of things would be a symbol for an archetype. So that we don't ever actually see the archetype or grasp the archetype. The archetype is a bit elusive, but we'll see something that is a symbol that represents it. So the trickster is something that represents an archetype. So tricksters will occur in lots of stories, both modern novels and movies, and ancient fairy tales. There'll be tricksters, and the trickster is a symbol for an archetype, but we will call it the trickster archetype, kind of thing. So archetypes can be like mother and father, but they're not the same as stereotypes. Stereotypes are more constructed from conscious experience, I suppose. Conscious stereotypes. So the stereotype of a Yorkshireman. So people are going to hate this, but he wears a cloth cap and smokes a pipe, and he keeps pigeons, and he has a Jack Russell, and drinks John Smith's bitter, and what else? He's tight-fisted. That's a stereotype of a Yorkshireman. That's not an archetype. They're different. Meghan, everyone calls her Meghan Markle, but she's not Meghan Markle. She's Meghan Windsor. People kind of and they talk about Kate Middleton, don't they? But it's not Kate Middleton. It's Kate Windsor. So Meghan Windsor, the Duchess of Sussex. Which is difficult to say when you've got a sore tongue. I lost my thread then briefly. Well, I'm back with her. I didn't sleep very well last night. Meghan Markle, as people call her, did a podcast. I think it was a podcast, and she called it Archetypes. But she's clearly got no idea what an archetype is, because she's thinking of it as more like a stereotype. So she's not alone in that. Most people are the same. And I think she liked the word arc and arch because she's got the child called Archie, and she's got the Archwell Foundation. So I think that's why she chose that. She liked the word. But archetypes and the collective unconscious are often not what people think, particularly the collective unconscious. I'm not a Jungian expert. I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm an integrative psychotherapist. So So our training was based on a combination of a blending of different schools of psychology and psychotherapy. If I was going to train again, I probably would train as a Jungian, because it's really interesting. It's really deep stuff. And he was a fascinating guy. He had his faults. He had some funny ideas in some funny areas. Didn't always behave brilliantly well. But a few interesting things about Jung is Jung was the guiding principle behind Alcoholics Anonymous and all the other 12-step fellowships that came after, because one of the founders of AA was a patient of his, and he said to Jung, "Have you ever seen somebody with alcoholism as bad as mine get well?" And Jung said, "Well, yes, but only when they've had a profound kind of I can't remember the exact words he used, but he used something like a psychic conversion experience or something." And this guy said, "Well, what do you mean?" You said usually they've had some kind of religious conversion. And AA adopted a spiritual principles, not aimed at any particular denomination or adopting any particular religious belief system, but based on going through a spiritual journey, really. And that came from Jung. And on a personal level, I was with a friend once, and he said, "Oh, do you like, I've got something for you, do you like Jung?" And I said, "Yeah," thinking he was going to, and he would toddle off to get me this gift. I was thinking, oh, it must be a book, great, And he bought a geranium in a pot. I thought, hello, what's this got to do with Jung? And he said, this is a 7th generation cutting from a geranium plant that grew in Jung's conservatory in Switzerland. So I had that. Unfortunately, when I moved continent, I had to get rid of it. But what was nice was it flourished, and I took cuttings from it and was able to share the love and give cuttings to friends. So I got lots of friends that have got 8th generation cuttings from Jung's geranium, which is a really beautiful plant, very lovely smell, beautifully fragrant. So nice to think you're getting the same experience as Jung had as he was puffing his pipe in his conservatory, minus the pipe smoke, of course, but you have the option of providing your own. So I hope that makes sense. Having mentioned that I'm a psychotherapist, I work entirely online these days. So if you want to have psychotherapy with me, you can. Or if you know of anybody that I might be able to help, I tend to have key specialist areas that I work in. But if you think that you would like to work with me and you think that I might have something that you're looking for, you can give me a call. I also have a team as well. So if it's not appropriate for whatever reason for us to work together, if we know each other too well, I mean, generally people I know online, I don't really know. But if we haven't really got a relationship already, then we could work together. If not, I could refer you to some really good people. But yeah, I'm not a Jungian, so I use aspects of Jungian theory and practice. But if you're really interested, this kind of Jungian stuff excites you, then go and see a Jungian analyst. And there are Jungian counsellors as well. So check that out. So I hope that was interesting. And remember that our main work is in something called retroactive jealousy. And our goal is to get free information out there to people that are suffering with retroactive jealousy, because it's an under-recognised condition. So just by watching this video to the end, and I know you can tell that I'm winding down, if you watch it to the very, very end, that helps, that sends a little message to the YouTube algorithm, and the YouTube algorithm then promotes all our videos more widely, and over 100 videos are on retroactive jealousy, and it's life-saving stuff for people that have that condition and have never heard about it or don't even know it exists, or maybe they do know it exists but they don't know how to start getting well. So just by watching this video to the end, you're doing us a huge favour, and them a huge favour, and even more if you support us as a patron on Patreon, or you subscribe, or you hit the like button, or you I should say because all these things You can do all of these things if you feel really generous, or give us a nice comment. That all helps. That all helps promote those videos, those free videos that help people with retroactive jealousy. We don't always talk about retroactive jealousy, even though we're a retroactive jealousy channel, because I like to post regularly, and I can't just keep trotting out the same stuff about retroactive jealousy all the time. I only talk about retroactive jealousy when I've got something new or useful to say about it. So I will be back with you in another video soon, and it could be about retroactive jealousy, or it could be about almost anything else. So thank you for listening, and see you in the next one. Rangimarie.